I never thought it would come to this, that I'd end up fighting over something as simple as 3 dandelions. But here I was, barefoot on my porch, coffee still warm in my hand, staring at that neon yellow notice taped to my door like it was some kind of eviction letter. The words jumped out at me. Violation yard not maintained. Daily fine $100 until resolved. It felt absurd. 3 dandelions, that was the crime. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you know the drill. It's always the same polite threats, the font of bureaucracy printed on that paper. Cedar Ridge Estates had been my home for 5 years ever since my divorce. I bought that place for stability, for order. A quiet neighborhood where everything matched from the mailboxes to the shades of beige on the houses. It was the kind of place where you could let out a sigh, finally feeling like things were under control. But when I walked out to see what was apparently my violation there, they were 3 stubborn little dandelions pushing up through the dirt by my mailbox. And let me tell you, everything else in the yard was as tidy as it could get. Trimmed grass, perfectly edged lawn, no leaf out of place. Yet these 3 flowers, harmless, bright, and defiant, had apparently thrown the whole community into chaos. I couldn't believe it. My first instinct was to laugh. I figured it was some kind of mistake, a glitch in the system, so I called the number on the notice. I left a voicemail, polite as could be. No response. By that afternoon, Carl, my neighbor, came over while walking his Labradoodle. He saw the paper on my door. "You get one of these too?" he asked, nodding toward the notice. "You mean this is a thing?" I said. He shrugged. "New president," Carl said. "She's cracking down. Says property values depend on uniformity. Her name's Melissa Hardwick. You'll get used to it." I didn't know her well at first. She moved in 2 years ago, and within 6 months she was running the HOA like it was her own little empire. When I saw her at the next HOA meeting, I expected this to be simple, calm, rational, civil. But things quickly took a turn. The clubhouse smelled like lemon disinfectant and burnt coffee as the meeting started. About 20 people sat in folding chairs. Melissa was standing at the front beside a projector screen showing the words, "Community Standards Review." When they opened the floor for violations, she called my name. "Mr. Turner," she said, eyes flicking down to her clipboard. "Your property has been cited for failure to maintain lawn consistency in accordance with Section 4B. I stood up. "With all due respect, I mow every week. I edge, I water. There are 3 dandelions by the mailbox. That's it." A few people chuckled. Melissa didn't smile. "Rules are rules," she said, her lips tight. "Dandelions disrupt the visual harmony of the neighborhood." Visual harmony. That's when I started to see the problem. I tried to make my case. "I'll remove them tonight. Can we just void the fine?" She shook her head. "The violation stands until the property meets standards." There was a small smirk at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't huge, but it stung. And something about that smirk combined with her words set something off in me. Maybe it was the tone she used, maybe it was everything else I had swallowed up to that point. But being told my lawn wasn't good enough, well, that hit a nerve. I sat back down, nodding. I didn't argue. I just listened as she moved on to the next violation. Someone's trash had been left out for 20 minutes too long. When the meeting was over, I walked home, my eyes scanning the neighborhood. The lawns were so identical. Rectangles of green stretching from driveway to sidewalk, not a single leaf out of place. Perfect, sterile. I realized then that it wasn't about the flowers. It was about conformity. It was about a neighborhood where everyone's yard looked the same. And I couldn't just swallow that. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me. $100 a day for 3 flowers. It wasn't about the money. I could pull them up in 30 seconds. It was about being told that nature itself had to be trimmed into submission, that the beauty of a yard had to match an ideal one that wasn't mine. Somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m., I stopped being annoyed and started feeling something else, inspiration. If they wanted uniformity, maybe what they needed was contrast. The next morning I drove past the hardware store and didn't stop. I kept going straight out toward the county nursery about 20 miles away. This wasn't just about planting a garden, it was a declaration. I pulled into the lot full of dusty pickup trucks and handwritten signs. Diane, the older woman working there, greeted me. "What are you looking to plant?" she asked. I looked at the rows of wildflowers, the tall grasses swaying in the breeze. "I'm not sure yet, but I think I'm done with grass," I said. She smiled slowly, like she understood more than I'd said. By the time I left, my truck bed was full of native wildflower mixes, comb flowers, black-eyed Susans, clover sunflower starters, even some bamboo shoots that Diane promised would thrive along my fence. I wasn't planning vandalism. I wasn't breaking laws. I was just planting something different. That weekend, I started digging. As I rolled up the turf, I felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't out of rage. It was a deliberate act. By Saturday afternoon, my front yard looked like a battlefield. The grass had been ripped up in wide, uneven patches stacked at the curb like discarded carpet. I felt peace for the first time since that notice appeared. Carl wandered over again, dog leash in hand, eyebrows raised. "You renovating?" he asked. "Something like that," I replied, wiping dirt off my forearm. "Going native?" he asked, eyeing the bare earth. "You know she's going to lose her mind, right?" I shrugged. "I'm not breaking any rules. It'll be maintained. Just differently maintained." That word "differently" hung between us like a challenge. All weekend I worked. I mapped out sections in my head. Taller plants in the back, low-growing clover near the sidewalk. I installed a subtle stone border, making sure this wasn't neglect, it was intentional. The first handful of wildflower seed felt almost ceremonial as it scattered across the soil. By Sunday evening, Cedar Ridge had its first front yard that looked nothing like the cookie-cutter lawns around it. The next morning, Melissa showed up. She rolled down the window of her white SUV and stared at my yard, lips pressed tight. "What is this?" she asked. "Landscaping," I replied calmly, "still in progress." "This is not compliant with community standards," she said, barely masking her frustration. I just nodded. "Actually, I reviewed the bylaws. Section 3C specifies lawns must be maintained, but it doesn't mandate turf grass specifically." She paused, clearly caught off guard. "We will be reviewing this," she said, then drove off. For the next few weeks, nothing dramatic happened. The seeds sprouted tiny shoots, pushing up like they had something to prove. The bees came humming in the air. Butterflies fluttered. It was alive, vibrant, and the change felt permanent. One day, Mrs. Ellison walked by, shaking her head like usual, but then she stopped. "I still prefer tidy lawns," she said, "but I'll admit it's not as wild as I feared." That was the closest thing to a compliment I'd ever gotten from her. Then things really started to shift. A few neighbors replaced sections of their lawns with native plants. The HOA sent out a newsletter introducing new guidelines for native landscaping. But the real change came in the form of a letter. This one wasn't yellow. It was certified mail. The HOA had reviewed my yard and determined it met the minimum maintenance requirements. No further action would be taken. That was their surrender. And then came the state representatives, the official ones. They took photos, asked questions, and confirmed everything was up to environmental standards. The HOA received a formal letter outlining my yard's protected status. They knew that interfering would come with consequences. Melissa never confronted me again. The final moment came when she walked by one morning alone. She stopped and said, "You've made your point." I didn't want to make a point. I just didn't want to be fined for 3 dandelions. Maybe some people still think I went too far. Maybe it was unnecessary. But sometimes small conflicts expose bigger truths. So here's the question I want to ask you if you were in my place. Would you have just pulled the weeds and paid the fine? Or would you have pushed back, knowing it might create tension with your neighbors? Let me know what you think. And if you've ever had your own run-in with an HOA or anyone trying to tell you what your home should look like, share it with me. Because I know I wasn't the only one standing there deciding whether to stay quiet or plant something bigger.